All right, let's try this new seating arrangement. There we go. Mute myself. Edit. Live. Monetization on, please. I'd like to earn the 25 cents I'm going to get off of this. And live. Well, load first. Load. Load. Thank you. Live chat. And, as always, text Josh. Let's see if he's alive. Okay, and get everything up. For anybody watching the recording, as always, you can skip the first 10 minutes or so. This is going to be probably, I would hope, only an hour, as this is not like a primary stream. Those are on Thursdays. This is a not necessarily improv stream, but I was going to do this at some point. Come on, zoom out. Let's get these here. All right, there we go. Josh and someone else, although YouTube only registers one review as existing. Let's get everything up and ready. Google Docs. And as always, for anyone who's not familiar with them yet, I do have these various Google Docs that I constantly post the links to for you guys, where I've made all kinds of resources and done all kinds of work that you can look at, like this one, which shows different regions and countries and which areas of them have or have not been explored for oil and gas yet, such as there's Caspian Sea. Here's China. And gray is areas that could not have oil and gas. Regular, whatever shade the map normally is, that has not been colored in red yet, is areas that have not yet been explored. I have to shade in some of this actually and update this map because China just completed some exploration in the southern Taklamakan Desert there and found some stuff. And red on land, if it's a onshore and offshore map, shows areas that have been completely explored. And pink, again, if it's a both onshore and offshore map, then pink will be the shading for offshore areas that have been explored so far. Actually, I have to update that portion as well because a little bit down there is now also completely explored. And also, yeah, if it's just an offshore map, then I'll use red for the offshore area. But if it's both onshore and offshore, then onshore already explored will be red, and offshore already explored will be pink. And on all of them, gray is area that would not contain oil and gas. So I have that one, and I also have the various demographic overlays I've been making. So similar to population pyramids in that I just flipped them 90 degrees to make them vertical. These are for each country. I'm making one. Blue is the total number of births, and red is deaths plus or minus migration. So sometimes you'll see like big spikes or big dips randomly, and those often, more often than not, are sudden surges of outward migration or inward migration with and less frequently they're mass death events like 2020. Obviously, this spike in Indonesia was from deaths from COVID. But so I have these two docs so far that I've been doing stuff for putting together for you guys gradually. I think I have 20 countries demographic overlays now. But the actual doc we're going to this time is brand new just for this one occasion. We are going to, for the sake of getting it set up, at least, we'll set that up as Argentina, 4, positive 0.4 at least. And make sure we have enough room. We'll just insert rows as we go, I guess. So we'll do a sum, and everything above there will be part of the summation total. So we're going to go over the areas one by one, and we'll tally them up, whether they're going to be net losses or net gains in global oil production over the remaining part of the decade. Anybody else here? No. Just you two. Oh no, supposedly 4 people. 6 minutes. All right, well, I promised this would be really short, so regardless of who's here or who isn't here, I am actually going to start once we hit the 10-minute mark. Or maybe I'll be merciful and delay it to the 11-minute mark. Let's get the production graphs up. Yeah, for the ones that I'll want to show, I think, like the first one I was going to show is probably going to be Angola. Oh, no, wait, I forgot. We're going continent by continent. Okay, I'll just grab whatever as we get there. All right, so we'll wait a little bit, like 3 more minutes to see whoever shows up. Cat pick, must like cat pick. And I do actually have a Twitter account. No, I'm not going to call it X. I do actually have a Twitter, AK_Maxogear. If anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, I primarily repost like a bunch of cat charity stuff and other things. And occasionally I will make actual like posts. And when I get into an episode occasionally where I'll actually post like some of my photography before I just end up slacking off about it, this is where I'll usually post it. Check for any updates. Blah, blah, blah. It has not yet begun. Again, as I said in the write-up I did about the whole situation, almost certainly being delayed until both Israel and associated allies feel that enough allied force assets are within the region to respond to a potential blowout of the entire situation. And this is all that was here from Noel before. Anybody else? Dang. We really are dead tonight. But then again, 2 minutes left. Thursday is my real, actual, supposed to be stream night, so I wouldn't expect that many people to show up now. I had to chug some water there. All right, we'll be starting in South America and working our way up. This alignment feels a bit off. Where's the compass? Where's my compass? Google. How do I get my compass back? What have you done? I have no enemy but you, Google Earth. You are the absolute bane of my existence. Okay, 2-1-2-1-2. All right. Similarly, it's just going to be Josh and one other dude. All right. 20 seconds. I'll take one more sip of water. Then I'm going to do the whole rundown, hopefully quickly, and then that's going to be it. And then we will have the regular global events and deterioration of mankind developments stream on Thursday, like usual. And it is showing up publicly, right? Should. Okay. All right. So, presumably, most people who are going to be seeing this are watching the recording. So, sorry, I sort of didn't really schedule this, but only decided I was going to do it like 2 hours beforehand, so you guys couldn't really show up. But, anyways, going down the list as I already iterated I was going to do. So, over the course of the remainder of the 2020s, starting from current levels of things, and in some cases, like in many of the OPEC producers, their current plateaus or should be levels, not whatever particular position they happen to be at right now with their either production cuts or production oversurges. But Argentina, mostly because of the Vaca Muerta shale and a little bit because of some offshore stuff down off the coast of Tierra del Fuego, should by 2030 get up to roughly about 1.1 million barrels per day from a point right now of about a bit under 700,000. For anybody who saw the non OPEC countries' oil production levels update I finally just posted, they've jumped up to close to 700,000. So 700,000 up to 1.1 million is obviously a 400,000 barrel per day increase net wise. So they come in as a 0.4. Since we're doing this in the millions, go down there, and that will be where the sum appears. So 0.4 on their regard. And then over the remainder of this decade, we will see field shutdowns as they reach their terminal abilities, and thus effectively the final death of Peru's and Bolivia's oil production, as they've both indicated that they're not really going to do much more with their remaining unexplored area. So the two of them combined shutting down fully will be a net drop of 100,000. Make sure it's registering. Okay, yep. Total net is plus 300,000 then because of that. Ecuador, as I have explained before in many of the oil production levels videos and occasionally on stream, Ecuador is one of the few largely oil bearing countries that has actually entered the fully explored category. So there's nothing left for them to find. And the last of what they had was added into production a couple of years back. And they hit their ultimate peak rates a bit above 550, from which they have now entered terminal decline and are down into the upper 4,000s. And over the course of the remainder of the 2020s, they could continue declining down by an additional 200,000 barrels per day or so, roughly So they come in as a net loss of 200,000, puts the sum down there at, let's bring it into view, though it puts Argentina out of view. Oh well, uh, Argentina's economy keeps dropping in and out of view anyways in real life. But so that brings it down to a net gain of 100,000 over the remainder of the decade. And then we have Colombia, who does have a decent bit more area. However, they have stated outright that they are not going to be doing any more oil and gas exploration. The leases they already sold in this upper area up here were, I guess, apparently going to be the last ones ever. So they are primarily going to just continue on their way down, and they're approaching where they would be at the end of their ability to hold themselves in the upper 700s, which is where they've been for a few years, as they've been descending in sort of a set of stair steps down from 1 million. So they will be dropping over the remainder of the decade by probably about 250, from up over 750 to some down to somewhere between 500 and 550. So they come in as a negative 2.5 there. So total net loss of 150. However, then they get countered as we have Guyana. Guyana, who, and again, these numbers that I am inputting and speaking about, I'm only speaking to things that are already locked in, scheduled, things that are guaranteed to come about. Stuff that is uncertain, like whatever's going to happen to Venezuela up or down, I can't factor in because it's like 120% uncertainty. So I'm only factoring in, like Guyana might actually get up to 1.5 before the end of this decade, but it's only guaranteed thus far that it will get up to 1.2 before 2030 hits. So Guyana is heading for 1.2 before the end of the decade, and that is on top of the roughly 400,000 they've gotten up to. So that's a net gain out of Guyana of 0.8. Let me chug some more water real quick. So we're back in positive total net gain for the remainder of the 2020s. Then next to them, you have Suriname, who will be entering into oil production in the second half of this decade. Total stuff set for them thus far is to hit a likely peak, again, only based on what has been found and put into development thus far, of about 800,000. However, the full 800,000 is likely not until the very early 2030s. The only dead set guarantee looks to be about 600,000 during the rest of the 2020s. So they come in as a net plus 0.6. And so there it looks like we're actually up to a net gain of 1.25 million over the remainder of the 2020s. And then we factor in Brazil also. So Brazil has effectively now, they haven't reached 3.7 just yet, but they're about to, and guaranteed they will go up to 4.5 or 4.6, but for safety's sake, we'll say 4.5 by the end of the decade, and will start to enter into a very lengthy, very long, like what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, I forget the word, but not very sharp, not very pointed bell curve like peak, but a very long, more shallowy type peak around like 5 or over 5 eventually. But the guarantee over the rest of this decade is up to 4.5. So from 3.7, roughly right now, that is a 0.8 increase So, from South America collectively putting everything together, we end up with a net gain of just over 2 million barrels per day over the remainder of the decade. Then, moving up from South America, and again, like I said, Venezuela, we can't really factor in because we have no idea what's going to go on in that direction. It'll depend on what they do now that they aren't under sanctions. It'll depend on what wacko decisions they make in general. It'll depend on when they decide to try their Guyana invasion, which will result in them getting curb stomped by the U.S. in response. And I mean, whatever new administration comes after that, because that will ultimately result in the deposition of the current Caracas regime. Under that new regime, it's effectively guaranteed that then outside oil industries will be let in and the Orinoco Belt will be brought up to surgeons. But the timeline of that is completely uncertain. Mexico. Right. Check. Anybody? 352. No. Mexico at current is about 1.9 or so. And with some of the remaining lingering stuff they're doing, that should boost it up to around 2. And they do have a couple 200,000 barrel per day fields in the Gulf that will be coming online over the remainder of the 2020s. And offsetting the rates of decline, basically, it should be enough. It won't be literally staying right at 2 or right at 1.9. It'll be undulating around, but it's effectively set that it should keep them roughly the general same area for the remainder of the decade, the next 6 or 7 years. So Mexico, we can put off to the side as no. So no actual change on Mexico's part. On the U.S.'s part, however, the U.S. has just hit most likely really about 12.9 or 13 million barrels per day. We are experiencing at the moment, because of several large fields that came online in the Gulf, what's likely a temporary oversurge up to 13.2. That will likely be brought down to a flat 13 or so, but I could be wrong. We'll find out in a few weeks. And the U.S. is approaching its peak, its second and final peak over the next few years. And after that, it will begin coming down. Some of that downturn will end up being pretty quick because of how shale works. From the current point of assuming 12.9 or 13 million barrels per day, so not the total drop from what the U.S. peaks at in the upper 13s, but from the current point of like 12.9 or 13 million barrels per day, that should be, as we hit 2030, all in all, we'll estimate for safety's sake a net loss of 500,000. And from that point on, as we go into the 2030s, that will become much more steep there on in. Canada is next after that. And Canada is guaranteed a gain, net gain over the next several years of about 400,000. And after that, as things are set thus far at the moment, it would remain relatively flat there unless, something extreme happens, but I can't predict unpredictables. So Canada comes in also as a net gain of a 0.04 or of 0.4, sorry. And that is basically everyone for North America, as there are, Cuba does produce some petroleum. Guatemala does produce some petroleum, but, 20 or 30,000 barrels a day doesn't really matter. And in Guatemala's case, 5 or 6,000 barrels a day really, really does not matter. So then we swing over to Europe, where we have the UK. The UK, who is not Norway. Norway is constantly expanding into further exploration and development. Although Norway has Norway has a lot more, that they can go up into than the UK does. The UK has these pockets here and here, and then basically just has this left. But the UK still isn't really doing that much with what it has, and it's stalling. It's slowing down its decline a little bit, but still, it's around 700,000, and over the remainder of the decade, it's likely to go through a net further decline of about 200,000 before in the 2030s, stuff that they discover in all of the territory that they just finally opened up to oil and gas exploration is likely brought online in that time frame and stalls them around like 500,000, or maybe bumps them up again by like a couple 100,000, like how they bumped back up from here during the 2010s. But we'll see how that goes about when it comes. And then Norway is currently hanging out around 2 and has several projects that will be coming online with a few tens of thousands each, plus an expansion to the Johan field that will be bumping up by another like 100 or 150. And then over the preceding years towards 2030, those will then decline down from that and basically come right back down to the same place. So Norway effectively comes in with no net change in either direction from where it is now at 2 million to where it will be in 2030. So it will bump up between now and then to like between 2.2 and 2.25 million barrels per day, and then by 2030 decline back down right to a flat 2 million, roughly. Again, roughly. Denmark and the Netherlands are shutting down their remaining oil production intentionally. The Netherlands was effectively dead, anyways. Denmark could have kept going and could have done some enhanced recovery efforts, but they're green obsessed and obsessed with green virtue signaling. So they're shutting everything down, just like the Netherlands did to their natural gas production. So combined, the two of them give us a net loss of 100,000. And then who else we got here? Italy should basically remain the same because they still have stuff over here that they can that they are like doing stuff with and continuing at the same casual rate they always have over the course of the last century. They've always basically just always roughly kept themselves at about 100,000 barrels a day. And so they should be able to keep doing their whole leisurely relaxation production thing for another 1 or 2 decades. And then the decline of other associates, plus further decline from Romania, all around will end up being another rough 100,000 down. Actually, we're just gonna add that. We're just gonna add that in total here to save some row space. So in total, those together, a net loss of 200,000. And then going down into Africa, Libya is in a seat of unpredictability. They, if all stability remains, should be able to start increasing their production meaningfully in a few years. However, things could happen between now and then, and that's not like really guaranteed or locked in. Egypt continues to add things at a very leisurely pace, like always, and it's not enough to perpetually hold them. Like it held them roughly a bit above a 600 for a while, then down to like 550, and they're getting close to the point where they're going to end up slipping down like below 500. So they are likely to end up as a net loss of 0.1. Algeria was able to expand some production, but from their current capability, they will see a further decline of likely at least 100,000, unless, depending on the speed of developments of new discoveries that they make. However, most of the new discoveries that they have made as they've ramped up exploration and development in the last couple of years, most of them have been gas because that is what most of it's going to be in their particular basin setups that they then also share with Mali and Mauritania. However, nothing really happens in Mali and Mauritania's part because they've been perpetually unstable because of militant and terrorist groups constantly being funded, like many terrorist groups are, by Saudi Arabia for the sake of maintaining instability across so many different countries that would otherwise potentially be contributable oil producers and would thus lessen Saudi Arabia's share of the market if they actually emerged as oil producers, which is the rough, really brief, really fast summary of why Saudi Arabia constantly funds so many terrorist groups and funds both sides of civil wars in some cases, like in Libya's case. But Algeria will then actually we can stack again. That's a good idea because it's stack and save space. Algeria will also be a -1 in that regard. Senegal will be emerging as the oil producer, jumping up to 100,000 with their first field, and then they have several other fields over the remainder of the decade that are smaller, but that will offset the decline from that first field, so that they should effectively, as things stand thus far, relatively stay roughly at 100,000 or so. And so we will enter them in as a net gain of 100,000. And then we have a bunch of losses elsewhere. Chad and Cameroon will effectively die as oil producers, and as well as Sudan and South Sudan. And I think I'm forgetting about someone. Oh well, I'll remember when the time comes, I guess. But so the death of those four together will effectively result in, let's stack them, Chad, Cameroon, Susosu, or I'll just leave it as Suso, I guess. A total downing of 250,000 roughly. So still in a net gain for the rest of the decade at 1.2 million barrels per day. Then who else do we have to look at? Cote d'Ivoire will be jumping upwards to about 180 in total, and then declining down from that a bit, and ending the decade probably at about 150 or so, or like 140, which is about 100 above where they are now. So we can actually stack them with Senegal, put that as CD, and combined they give a net gain of 200,000. Namibia is not going to factor in this decade as their full development has been delayed. Their entry into production until 2030 itself. So they fall just outside of the entry zone. Angola uh, has stuff coming online offshore, as all their stuff is offshore, that has stalled and slowed their decline. So they're not going to drop all the way down to like 600,000 or so, like they probably otherwise would have, but they are going to keep their decline going. And they will probably, from the roughly 1.1 that they are at relatively right now, they will probably still drop down by about 300,000. So you throw them in, we get a net loss from them of 300,000. Anybody else? It's back. What happened? Did it drop? I mean, nobody else is saying anything. I am green, although it says my bitrate is 0, but it always says my bitrate is 0. Uh, Gabon will continue adding fields in a way that basically lets them maintain their current production level, kind of. Uh, Congo is basically out of room and will be heading into an actual downslide. So they will come up as a net loss. They be about 100,000. And then, Nigeria is in a phase of unpredictability, but we'll assume that they don't utterly collapse and that they remain the same. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So we'll just consider them null. Saudi Arabia, effectively null, as they will be close to the end of their ability to maintain a 10 million barrel per day plateau, but they will not have reached that point just yet. Not just yet. The others, Oman will likely be staying relatively the same, or at least in the same general area. The UAE, again, that will all depend on whether like the production cuts ends, whether they just dip out on their own, or what have you. Iraq, guaranteed, guaranteed would at least go up from 4.8 as their current maximum that they've gone up to before, up to 5.2. So at the minimum guaranteed, that would be plus 400,000. Where's I? Oh no, over here. Iran, again, not entirely all that predictable, especially because of the inevitable various different wars that are potentially coming up. Azerbaijan, oops, no, AZG, or AZJ, sorry. Despite additional stuff that will stall and slow the decline, they are still roughly going to be a net loss of about 200,000 over the remainder of the decade. And what else? Oh yeah, Turkmenistan roughly down by about 100,000. Not entirely, but you can throw associated declining countries that are too small to mention in there to round it up. And I'm just going to throw them in here to save some row space. So that then brings that up to a total net loss of 200 on that end. So all in all, still a net gain thus far of about 1 million barrels per day of production over the remainder of the decade. However, that's not actually a lot, considering uh, the continuing growth of oil consumption, which has slowed compared to previous times, but is still growing at roughly 1 to 1.5 million barrels per day per year. So it is still going to increase by between like 6 and 9 million barrels per day over the remainder of the decade, if the room enables it to, which doesn't exactly look like it will. Uh, Qatar actually will likely be going down a bit. They're not a perpetual plateauer. They are kind of like a downward stair step plateauer, as their first set plateau was about 1.5. So between now and then, they are likely going to drop from 1.3 down to 1.2 as a plateau. We'll keep going to the wrong thing. India, currently at about 600,000, and their decline is kind of steep, although they are about to get a few boosts back upwards. It won't really uh, be enough for that long. Yeah, they've had enough to stall them a bit. However, they are about to start. They were about to start a new drop. Granted, that drop was about to be countered a bit. They were going to get boosted back up about here by a new field off the state of Gujarat in their offshore waters, and then resume the decline from there. But what's their general rate on that? That was 650, 750. Yeah, about. Oh no, well less than. Okay, I'll round it up to 650 anyways. So that's yeah, about 100,000 over the course of 3 years. So they will be a net loss of about 100,000 because of their upsurge that's about to come from that new field. So in net total, they will be down by 100,000. Indonesia is going to continue their gradual decline, uh, probably down by another 100,000 as well, because they are getting new stuff. However, most of, just like with Malaysia, most of what's offshore for them is gas. And then Malaysia will also be continuing their decline. Actually, we can stack Malaysia and Indonesia, as in total, they will be a net loss of about 200,000. So at that point, that has us down to a net gain of only 600,000 barrels per day of oil production over the next decade. Vietnam, unless they have further oil and gas exploration offshore, they will be a net loss of about 100,000 over the preceding years. And then China, as things currently stand with China, they have some stuff coming online. Basically, everything's just enough to where it's going to hold them at like 4.2 or 4.3 for a number of years before their background decline is inevitably going to take them back over and start bringing them further down again. For safety's sake, I will only call them dropping down to 4. Granted, they probably will drop further than that, but again, for safety's sake, we'll say a net loss of about 250 or so. And actually, we've hit the point where we need to insert some rows. Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan could go higher than what is guaranteed, but again, we're only talking about things that are guaranteed in this one. So, guaranteed, what is locked in thus far is Kazakhstan increasing from 2 up to 2.2 million barrels per day. So, as an increase, net gain of 200,000 on their part. And Russia has become ever unpredictable. So, speaking from where they have dropped to just now, as they are continually drawing down their production in attempt to conceal their production downturn that would be happening otherwise because of the departure of all the Western oil majors that rescued their oil production post USSR collapse and kept expanding their production afterwards, going into Arctic and permafrost stuff. So they've drawn down like 9.2 or 9.3. Now, granted, following the particular pattern of post USSR collapse and the rate at which it occurred, taking in the initial movements and then the broad rate after the first year, I only would expect the downturn to have been the first year from when it started, which I assumed it would start spring of this year, which I ended up being right on because that's when they decided they were going to start making, they called them revenge production cuts. So from the point of the downturn starting, I assumed it would be about 500,000 barrels per day of downturn the first year, and then it would hit the post USSR collapse rate of about 1 million barrels per day per year. And if where is it? I better not have deleted it. Oh, there it is. If allowed to go all the way down to the Arctic and permafrost stuff and tight oil and unconventional things being taken out of the picture, which is effectively what happened post USSR collapse. The temperate climate conventional oil was left. In that case, if it was left unabated to keep going down and down, then it's got down to about 6. Now, though, the background decline rates from that have likely taken it down closer to 4. So they could theoretically fall all the way down to 4. I doubt that's actually going to happen. However, they are quickly drawing down production further and further than I initially even expected them to. They're going faster than the rate at which they would need to conceal stuff because first, again, they dropped from 10.8 million barrels per day down to 10 million barrels per day just to start with after the war because Europe stopped buying their oil, so they can't keep pumping out oil if the oil isn't going anywhere. Then they dropped from 10 down to 9.5 as a revenge production cut, which again was uh, completely contradictory because Europe wasn't the one buying their oil. Now India and China are. So the only people they'd be harming by doing that are their own friends or countries they claim are their friends. But, whatever, it's Russia. So they dropped down to 9.5. And then they dropped even further recently down to 9.2, which all of which already was way ahead of schedule, you could call it, as the drop from 10.8 down to like, say, 9.3 was about 1.5 million barrels per day in total. And assuming that the first fields they shut down were the ones that they would lose first, anyways, then that's 1.5 million barrels per day shut down, and thus would, in theory, at least by my theory, be enough to conceal their downturn until spring of 2025. And then they would have to start shutting down more stuff, or at least sometime before then to conceal further downturn, or just admit to the downturn and let it play out. However, it might be actually going faster than I expected it to because they just announced that they are potentially going to cut production even further already as soon as next month. I think this is the one. Yeah, they're oh yeah, they also put the option of raising production, which they're not going to because they also put that option in the last two times and didn't do it because they can't. But so they're already considering that now. That's kind of that's quite a bit ahead of time, at least on like the time frame I was initially thinking of. So things might be going down faster than I initially expected. Initially, at least, it looked like it was going at about the schedule I thought it was. The mining output declines are still going right at about the pace that I thought they would, but it looks like their oil declines internally might be going faster than I anticipated. So I'll have to see how that actually turns out. But since each time they put up the option, they always end up just cutting further, at least as this pattern has started. I'll assume that they will cut, we'll say, another 300,000 down to or since they're between 9.2 and 9.3, 250 down to a flat 9 million barrels per day. Now, again, if the situation continues dragging on after everything, they will downturn further and further. However, that is again completely unpredictable because when their whole Ukraine thing inevitably falls apart in the pretty immediate future, then I have no idea how long the internalisms inside of Russia will play out after that, and how soon the outside oil majors will be allowed back in to recover things. Because, once a new relative government faction uh, locks themselves into power, at least tentatively, the first thing they will want to do is actually allow the outside oil industry back in to recover oil production, because that's the primary backbone of their internal government revenue, and also the internal backbone of their corruption self-ingratiating revenue that fills their own bank accounts. Which is why Putin has a net worth of like $83 billion. But so I would say guaranteed, based on the statement that they're potentially about to implement further production cuts, that they will drop down by, we'll say, another 250. It's probably going to be a decent bit more before all is said and done. But again, that falls into the realm of unpredictability. So putting all of this together ends us up over the remaining portion of the 2020s with a total net increase in global oil production of 200,000 barrels per day, compared to a otherwise likely uh, minimum assumed increase of like 5 or 6 million barrels per day in terms of global demand. Now, of course, that can be dealt with via increases in different producers who have higher production output capabilities. Like, say, if the UAE gets out from under the Saudi thumb, out from under the OPEC stuff, and just increases up to the 4 million barrel per day that they plateau that they want to hold, then that can be compensated for partially. Also, Oman likely could floor the accelerator a bit higher, uh, by like maybe an extra 200,000 or 300,000. Kuwait, I'm not sure what their like maximum output would be. I just know based on working out the math that they could hold a 3 million barrel per day plateau, which is their normal output. I know they could hold that until this point, probably around 2051 or 2052. But in terms of like flooring up their output, I don't know what their ceiling is. I would probably, based on the smaller number of fields that it's coming from, I'd assume their ceiling would probably be between 3.5 and 4. Then, of course, there's the chance that uh, a post defeat and post internal realignment Iran could restore up to a full 4 million barrel per day plateau from their current 3 million barrels per day. And then there's always the possibility and hopefulness of Iraq, actually just getting rid of all the Saudi influence nonsense and just going up and over 5 million barrels per day like they are capable of and should. For safety assumptions, they could probably at this point only get up to 7 by 2030. But regardless, that would be like an extra one, an extra four, or sorry, an extra two, an extra potential one from Iran, an extra potential half from Kuwait, so 3.5, and an extra potential one from the UAE. So like an extra 4.5 million barrels per day of spare capacity that could be dialed up. So like at a relatively, or not a relatively short notice, but so that would give you like, a 4.7 possible above current total. But, that still ends up coming short of the 5 to 6 minimum increase in global oil consumption we're going to see over that time. So it's not exactly working out the best, at least as things stand as of the current moment. But again, this is accounting for things as the guarantees stand. Again, other things may come into play. Venezuela may try Guyana very soon, like it actually looks like they're going to. It looks like they're going for it several years before I thought they would. Get curb stomped, reorganize internally, and then rebound in oil production. Brazil has found additional stuff down in some of their lesser explored areas of their southeastern waters. So they could end up adding things and coming higher than 4.5. But we are going to actually see how all that ends up playing out. And also, of course, stuff could happen anywhere and everywhere at any given time and could crash any number of oil producers. Like China's, for example, China's, oil production would kind of implode temporarily in the internal shattering that would happen in the aftermath of their failure to take Taiwan. But also, China's oil production only goes to meet China's oil demand, and in the aftermath of failing at Taiwan, their own oil demand itself would also collapse for at least a number of years. So, uh, definitely not a great deal of certainty. But what certainty is had is not the best supply meeting demand outlook. Oh, you and your you and your emote cringe. All right, that is things as they currently stand for the outlook for net total changes and potentialities for oil production over the remainder of the 2020s, the next 6 years and some odd months, since we're getting close to the end of 2023. 3 years into what we all grew up as viewing as or always having portrayed as the future. Since at least when I remember growing up, all the whether documentaries or films, either or, fiction or quote unquote nonfiction, all the stuff like uh, predicting or set in the future was always at minimum set in or past 2020. So we've now gone 3 full years into the future, which to the surprise of no one basically looks kind of pretty similar to what the past did, except that everyone's walking around with their face glued to a cell phone now. That's probably going to be it for this one, unless there's any super chats or anyone ends up asking anything other than Josh just making emote posts. Well, actually, while I wait to see if anybody has anything to say or ask, check on everything. Oil is dropping. You should not be doing that right now. With how things are set up in the Middle East, especially, now is not the time for you to be dropping in price. So I don't know what you think you're doing. Uh, was there anything else I wanted to check while doing that? Oh, well, I guess for anybody who is here or who watches past this point, I could show you. So, again, like I said, since you guys complained a lot over the course of time about how the oil consumption graphs that I show in the oil demand levels update videos are long-term graphs, and oftentimes they're several years behind. Again, I don't control those websites, so I'm not in charge of updating their graphs. But I have painstakingly spent hours of work constantly copying data over by hand to make actual up-to-date monthly fluctuation graphs for you guys, or bi-monthly at least. And yes, I have to manually copy it because they have everything for one set horizontally, and also it's like protected. So like I can't actually like, copy and paste it. So I have to constantly switch between tabs looking at the data on their spreadsheet because their spreadsheet also isn't Google Docs Excel. It's some other like software thing. So I have to constantly tab back and forth looking at their stuff, typing in the data, and keep doing that, and then working it all up. So I've gotten graphs done for a lot of the countries, including countries like Kazakhstan, for example, who do not post publicly their oil consumption data. So to actually get these, you guys, I have to do a bunch of math, constantly looking back and forth between tabs at what they do publish, which is their oil production, obviously, their oil exports, and their refined oil products, imports and exports. So I have to constantly, for each individual pair of months, not each individual months. I did give myself a bit of reprieve by not doing every month, but doing every other month. So each one I have to go back and forth between like 5 and 6 tabs of nonsense and balance out a bunch of math to get their actual oil consumption levels. But I have started to do that for countries that I previously didn't have the data for, but now I found this workaround that I can get it anyways. So, like I said in that channel post, you cannot hide your data from me, no matter how hard you try. So I got Kazakhstan, and I made the shade on the Kazakhstan graph the same like blue shade as the Kazakhstan flag. Uh, Spain publishes their data. There's some demographic stuff. There's Chile again. Iran was another one who doesn't publish their consumption data that I had to do the workaround stuff for. But I was able to get their data, and you could see different patterns, like the downturn after the global recession in 2008 2009, the attempted upsurge slash recovery, but then the sanctions hit their economy in its entirety, and even past that, inevitably their increasing population still started taking their demand upwards. Philippines does publish their data. Australia does. UK, Iraq. Malaysia does not. Malaysia, I had to use math to get. So I did get to Malaysia, but that is so I am working on that stuff, and I'm doing Singapore right now. Singapore is another one who doesn't publish their data, their consumption data at least, but I am working on it. Then I'll get Vietnam. Pakistan, and Argentina, however, are really, really aggravating because they don't, at least not frequently, at least not, or in places they're supposed to, don't publish their exports and imports of like refined fuel products and everything either. So I'm gonna have to go on an adventure to try to find those for you guys to then work through math to, get graphs up for their demand levels. But I will keep doing it. Okay, I'll keep working on it. All right, looks like nothing. All right, so that's gonna be it for this one. So thank you everybody for coming around, and I will see you all around. Either in the next video that might come up tomorrow, if not, then the regular stream on Thursday. Which whether you're watching now or whether you're watching the recording of this, yeah, Thursday will be the regular, usual, total global events and situation stream, 5:30 or 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern as usual. So I'll see you there, and thank you, everybody.